You on holidays there, Kevin?
Try to pretend I am.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole for the City of Warman, April 20th, to order. And I'd first like to start with the City of Warman sends out our heartfelt condolences to the province of Nova Scotia and the communities affected by the mass shooting on the weekend. Our thoughts and prayers are with these families, the friends, and the communities of the victims. Let's observe a moment of silence to observe our sincere condolences. Okay, we have in front of us the agenda. Can I have an approval, please, of the agenda? Trevor and Kendall, okay, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with the city manager's report, please. City Manager Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Spence and members of council. The focus of our operations for the past month have been on the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as trying to keep other things operating as normal. Our senior management team meets on a regular basis to keep each other up to date on progress and operations, as well as reviewing best practices and sharing of information. Also, our communication team has been doing a great job of keeping our residents up to date with the most relevant information and answering any inquiries. And then finally, we've all been working diligently to ensure we are financially sustainable as we move through our unprecedented and unpredictable times right now. So as you'll see within each of the managers' report tonight, you'll see that kind of threaded through. And I do also want to thank the management team, staff, council, and the residents for their continued patience and understanding. I know it's a difficult time, but we will get through. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of Manager Smith? Councillor Philipchuk?
Just one quick question, and that ties to the strategic plan at the bottom. Just confirming that the consulting that we're looking at for the environmental master plan, is that going to be funded by FCM? Is that?
We haven't made application to them as of yet. Okay. Most of the funding is for larger projects. Once we get down the road, there will be a cost sharing and or loans. But that will be if we took on a large project. For instance, let's say we did a couple of electric charging stations, something like that.
Okay. Okay, I just looking for clarity there, just because I know it's been something that's been on for a while, but also just looking at how much FCM ties to that. But you're really looking at it's by project and by application.
Yeah. So the start that we have performed is just becoming a partner, and then that we had to commit to the 5 milestones. Within that, once we start our initial milestone, we might be able to apply for funding for that project, but okay. we haven't started down that road yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Shram.
I was just wondering, Bob, because I'm unfamiliar at this point about the flags going at half-mast. have they all gone down today?
No, they haven't. We were kind of waiting for the lead of the province.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Sorry, we're moving on to finance manager.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The first item I have on my report here is a COVID-19 expected revenue loss with the relevant also expenditures in that section as well. There are some different assumptions that are made between each scenario. The first scenario assumes that the campgrounds are up and running after June 30th, assumes that the summer fun program can proceed as planned, and assumes that the slow pitch is able to pick up in July. Whereas the second assumption assumes that none of those are able to move ahead. In summary, please keep in mind that both of these scenarios do maintain the layoffs that are currently in place, aside from those 7 full-time recreation and culture employees who are mentioned above, who would be redeployed to provide services where required. The specific employees that are chosen, that have been mentioned above, are subject to change based on the duties required and the capabilities of the individuals. It is also important to note that administration does recognize there will be additional cost savings to supplies and repairs and maintenance and even utilities through the shutdown of these facilities and essentially the operations. It's difficult to accurately gauge what these numbers might be, so we have left them out of the above calculations. Both scenarios above also do assume that neither Parks nor Public Works will hire summer students at all, and it's important to recognize that this will cause a decrease in services to the community.
Okay. I can't see, but does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, here we go. Councillor Shram.
I would just, with further clarification, will there be any foreseen cost saving measures after July and August, other than what has been put in your report?
I think that it's difficult to think that far ahead and make some assumptions. I guess it depends. One of our biggest cost savings right now are the layoffs, right? So depending on what sort of opening up of recreation and culture operations happen in the fall, I think there possibly could be. However, it's also important to recognize that right now those layoffs too were considered short term, and if they extend beyond those 12 weeks, we're then looking at them falling into the category of permanent layoffs. That's as far as the cost savings from the layoffs goes. As far as any other cost savings, I think possibly. We haven't delved into each line item within the budget yet, but I think that there could be additional cost savings there as well.
One last supplementary question with that is, now that the facilities have been closed for, well, it's coming on to being a full month, will that allow you to know some of the costs that we are saving from those facilities being closed?
I think I'll defer over to Paul to answer that question. He has been looking at some line items and trying to make those sorts of guesses, I guess I'll call it. But like one of the things he had said was, you know, for sure he's saving money in cleaning supplies. But what exactly, how much that's actually going to be is really hard to narrow down. But I'll see if Paul has anything additional maybe to add to that.
Hi guys, the only thing additional I have to that is it's tough to paint that complete picture because we buy a lot of our cleaning supplies as bulk. How much is going to get used during this time period when we're stagnant in the facilities is going to show up at the end of the year as those purchases of supplies and materials and stuff gets stretched out so we don't have to purchase every 3 months or every 4 months. Same thing with the fuel for the mowers and whatnot. If we're only cutting the parks once a week instead of twice a week, and sometimes the ball diamonds 3 times a week, you know, you're down to once a week on that. What that saving looked like, you know, it's tough for us to project that. But as this goes forward and we start to see some of this go further into July and potentially into August, well, you know, we're operating right now with the assumption that we're going to be back in business for August, which means that the ice plant has to come on in July. We have to make ice to meet those demand dates. And if this continues on, well, yeah, you're going to have significant savings in ice plant operations at the Legend Center. You know, we go day to day. We try to keep as many lights off as we can in our facilities. So you're going to see that in power and gas. We've turned the temperature down at the Brian King Center. We've turned the temperature down here at the Legend Center as there's just a few of us working in here. Lights haven't come on in the gymnasium in 3 weeks. You know, we haven't turned the halogen overhead lights on in the Legends in probably about the same time. So you're going to see a lot of those savings. What they look like right now, you know, until I start getting some invoices from Sask Power, Sask Energy, that's when we're going to start to see that stuff. We shut down operations basically a whole month in advance, and I know we lost a substantial amount of revenue coming in, but we also have a substantial amount of savings in shutting that ice plant down a full month in advance. So I don't know if that's a great answer for you, Kendall, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, Paul, I'm not, you know, trying to do needle in a haystack work. I just, I'm, you know, as questions would come, to just know the exact picture of big line items and to just on both sides of the scale. And, you know, you're doing a great job, so keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peterson?
I guess my question is similar in those lines, but more or less for the entire city, though, Amanda. Are we planning on tracking the differences in expenses and the losses in revenue so that we can kind of have that as a line item at the end for what the impact of COVID-19 was for us once this all shakes out?
Yeah, that's we won't see that number for sure again until further into the year. But yes, for sure, like when you get your quarterly financial updates, we'll get a picture of that for sure.
Okay, Councillor Philipchuk?
Just a couple things I'll ask in one question here. So by what you gave us, and again, it's high level generally, it looks like the decisions we made have made the finances, so that's not a major concern right now. So that's good. And if you don't agree with that, let me know. And the other thing is the key date. You mentioned June 26th. Is that the date of, and I'm taking that as the key date, as decisions being made, what is sort of the trigger date for redundancy pay? That, again, I know we would have a lot of obligation, obviously, if we go beyond that date.
Yeah, June 26th is our date where we can consider those layoffs temporary. And so if we were to extend past those dates, for each employee, there would be, you know, in some cases, some fairly significant payout.
Okay, good,
and
thank you.
To address your other comment, I would agree. In speaking with my counterparts in other municipalities, council made some really good decisions, I would say, really early on in the game that put us in an okay position right now. Okay.
Councillor Tooley, are you on holiday? I see a palm tree in the backyard. You have a question?
I just wanted to double check. Have we had any possible word on whether or not they're going to be extending that 12 weeks longer? Like, is that something that's potentially going to be on the table, or is that going to be a complete no?
We don't know right now. I would say it's definitely a possibility, depending on what happens with the economy across Canada as a whole, right? But right now, as of what we know right now, there has not been an extension.
Councillor Beck?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Spence. So just a question, I guess, for Amanda first, and then it'll probably get moved over to to Paul. But like obviously with this year, we do have one request here for for rental leniency and whatnot. Have we received anything else from any of our other tenants from the Legend Center?
You want me to take that? I'll take. We have not as of yet. We informed all of our upstairs and leases that are within the facility that we would be moving forward. We would be closing the doors, and that rent further on would be held simply because you had to enter the facility to get into those leases within the facility. The two on the outside, we didn't close right away, and that was Pro Sport and Anytime Fitness because they had their own separate entrances in. But we haven't had any, I haven't received any further requests.
But we're not collecting rent from the businesses upstairs, are we?
No, we are not.
Okay. All right, if there's no more questions, Amanda, we can move on.
The next item I have is a request for council to approve utility billing, overdue utility accounts being added to property tax rolls. So we have 3 separate utility accounts, which include 4 bills that administration is requesting to apply to the related property tax rolls at the next regular meeting of council.
Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments about that? The recommendation before us. Councillor Shram.
Thank you, Mayor Spence. How do we differentiate between these and that which we've allowed not to penalize late utilities? I know that the COVID date is there, but in perception of the public, how do we differentiate this in understanding?
Good question.
These accounts do go way back to, the spring, summer, and fall of 2019. So they don't relate to the COVID pandemic in any regard, I would say. We've made multiple attempts to collect on these accounts throughout the fall and winter.
Kendall, do you further follow up?
Well, I understand that. I do. I'm trying to understand that there could be a controversy in the information of this because it becomes clouded that we're not. I know that we're not, but how do you differentiate that in a public sense without it getting twisted? I find that a little bit hard to know how to deal with that, and maybe administration has some ideas.
Well, and the other part of that too is, although they are in their arrears, they may have real life COVID situations going on in their household where they've been laid off or whatever. So I kind of share some of the questions of Councillor Shram, and I see Councillor Beck has something to offer there as well. Do you want to maybe offer that first before we get a response back?
Sure. Yeah, certainly for me, like the way that I see it is obviously with this year collection was started, and also with this year, or certainly like the request for payment was certainly started before the COVID crisis had certainly hit. But I guess one point that I would like to get clarification on is whether or not there's going to be continued interest tacked onto that amount, because certainly with this year, one of the things that we did do is with this year we basically did say that the penalties weren't going to accrue for late payments. Certainly for this year, I do see this as being more capital than, let's say, operating at this point, because it is something that has been in arrears. So I don't think I share, quite the same concern as yourself, and also for, for Councillor Shram in that regard. But, certainly with this here, I guess I'd like to, make sure that in Amanda's response, that clarification is made with the, with the accrual of, let's say, interest on the outstanding amount, because that there should not being, let's say, be enforceable for the time that we have suspended it.
Yes, you're correct. We have stopped applying interest to all overdue accounts, which would include these accounts as well.
Okay.
If I
Councillor
could.
Philipchuk? I think, can we, Councillor Philipchuk and then City Manager Smith. Can't hear you, Gary. Put you on mute.
Thanks. Just a point of clarification with that, like these are now, the request is really to change this over from the people that were living in the suites or are living in the rentals now to the owner of the place. So it really is two different people, because we're not really talking about the people that are currently there as much as now it's gone to the owner. So it is a difference. I believe by everything I read there that those people are no longer, the people that accrued some of this are no longer living there. So now it's being transferred to the owner.
You're correct, yes.
If I could maybe add, that's absolutely correct, but there won't be any penalties or anything added to these accounts. They'll be, because they're transferred to the tax account, they'll be treated like a tax. So it actually wouldn't be anything until September that there would be interest added on, or penalty of the 1%. And I guess at that time, if council makes a decision to extend it, let's say to the end of the year or something, then it would, I guess if they didn't, then there would be penalties added on, just like any other tax. If they extended farther, then that would be a benefit to the property owner.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Manager Smith. Any other questions on this? Okay, is there anything else, Amanda?
No, the other two items I have are just updates. Thank
Okay.
you.
Anybody have any other questions of Amanda? Councillor Tooley?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question around item number 3, the property tax appeals. And my understanding is that there's now been a ministerial order issued that any assessment rolls that weren't closed as of a certain date, we're going to be actually having the appeal deadline extended from 30 days to 60 days this year.
That order, I think I'll defer to Bob because I know he has more information on that. I do know that that order does not apply to us, but I know that Bob does have some information, additional information on it.
Yes, Councillor Tooley, I did contact Advisory Services to inquire if, because ours closed on the 16th, and actually the order had indicated, I think it was the 14th, that it would apply anybody that closed after that date. And I was informed by Advisory Services that it doesn't apply to the cities.
Thank you.
I see that Mayor Spence is away for a moment. So I think we can move on then to, if there's nothing else for Finance Manager. I think I have next is planning. I don't have the agenda in front of me. I just have the notes. So planning.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Philipchuk, Mayor Spence, members of council. Reports mainly for updates today. We were planning on having Neil, the project manager for P4G, do a bit of a presentation to council at this committee of the whole, just in terms of updates, kind of where the project's at and where we're going. However, just because you lose some of that effect kind of in a remote meeting like this, and there wasn't anything overly pressing, and some of the items we'll be discussing at the ROC meeting this week will play into that. I felt that it was probably appropriate that we delay that until we do kind of meet face to face next, which hopefully is sooner rather than later. We haven't heard anything back in terms of the applications for the targeting funding yet, although we'll be getting an update on that at our ROC meeting this week. Saskatoon Freeway project does continue to move ahead. I did include some information just regarding some of the survey and online engagement that they did have taking place. Moving forward, they'll be looking at some areas that don't necessarily have as direct of an effect on the city of Warman, but that still are important to the corridor as a whole. We are gonna, you'll probably notice we're continuing on the traffic signal installation at Pebble Beach. SAS Power has just completed installing their service line in there. That was kind of what was holding us up for the time being. We're planning on commencing the pavement on the west end of Clubhouse Boulevard, basically as soon as weather allows for. There's not a ton of work left to do there. We're hoping that, you know, a week and a half and everything can be done in there. That project's dragged on for probably longer than it should have at this point. Once the weather does warm up and frost is out of the ground, Public Works and Planning, along with our engineers, will be taking a look at different areas of the city in terms of our pavement management project. There has been some information coming down the pipes suggesting that pricing for pavement this year may be cheaper, due in part to oil prices and just the economy slowing down as a whole. So we are going to monitor that, and if there is something there, may look at doing some more paving under that contract than we typically do. But once we have a better idea on where we're at with that and what prices are, we'll bring some further information back to council before any kind of decisions are made. Bylaw has been fairly busy continuing with animal control. I think with the spring, there's lots of animals and that kind of thing out. We have had a couple of reports of coyote sightings in the northeast end of the city. We did chase, I guess, the one that we did see kind of out of the city, but reminding residents that if they do see any wild animals, not to approach them and to contact bylaw enforcement animal control. Provided you some updated building permit numbers. They're not great, obviously. I guess you look at the commercial building permits and the number of permits is up, but the value, or sorry, not up, but close to values way down. That's mainly just due to the scale of the projects that are taking place. Last year was a lot of the buildings, the shells as a whole. This year it's more of that inside renovations and those kinds of things, which values on are significantly less. Moving forward, we are continuing work on the facilities portfolio and review. I did include an update from Firebird Consulting. I believe now he has chatted with all of the managers with the city, and they're continuing some of their peer review with a number of municipalities in Saskatchewan and Alberta, just looking at kind of best practices and creating a bit of a portfolio in terms of what some other municipalities do based on population size and service levels. In addition, we already did briefly chat about this in the last kind of Friday update, but I did provide a bit of a breakout just in terms of the real estate numbers and some of the information that we're getting from the real estate community in Warman. As mentioned, it was fairly positive going into March. Numbers were okay. And then since kind of the state of emergency, things have slowed down drastically. I'll keep up on that and continue to provide kind of monthly numbers. And if anything significantly changes, definitely let council know. I've included an update in terms of bylaw numbers for the month of March, and then just our updates to strategic planning items. So if there's any questions, I can definitely answer those or try to.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I had a technical glitch. I'm okay. Does anyone? Oh, Councillor Shram.
My question is not so much with the report, but requesting for administration for further research. So if anybody else has questions concerning the report, I will defer to them, and then if I may ask a few questions outside of the report.
Okay, I just got into the call late. Which report are you referring to?
No, just his report.
Oh, his report. Oh, okay, I see. Okay. Councillor Beck?
Thank you, Mayor Spence. So Brad, I do have a question. So obviously, like the like the roadways are going to go under some assessment. Are we going to do the same with sidewalks? And I guess the reason why I ask is with this year, obviously with this year, we had some work done last year, and along Fourth, just by the by the elementary school there and whatnot, some of those newly put in tiles from the fall last year, some of those have shown signs of wear and breaking already and that kind of thing. So I was just wondering if assessment of the sidewalks will take place, and also if there's any opportunity to address those deficiencies from last year.
So yeah, we do a similar program with our sidewalks. Public Works keeps kind of a running log in terms of areas that require sidewalk work. It's pretty comprehensive. Obviously, we kind of do a best to worst, or sorry, a worst to best type of situation, and typically only kind of get through so much of the list a year just based on budget. In terms of those panels that did sink or had some issues from last year, we'll definitely take a look, or Public Works will take a look this spring when they're doing their normal kind of survey work in terms of the sidewalk. We don't do the sidewalk work with our engineer. Typically what we'll do in that situation is go around with a few different contractors that we're familiar with and have done work in the past, and get different pricing from them based on kind of a per meter type price, and then go with the best price based on past experience and feeling comfortable with the work. So I can't say exactly what will happen with those panels, but we definitely will take a look at them in terms of when we do our sidewalk management kind of program this spring. And if there is issues from last year, definitely that'll come into play, especially when picking the contractor. And we'll also probably go back to the contractor from last year and see if there's any way that we could get those repaired. I'm not sure if Jason has anything to add to that or not. He's typically the one that will go around with the contractors, him and Dan.
Richard, I just wouldn't mind the exact address of which ones are damaged here, so we can pinpoint those and have a look. I haven't reviewed those sidewalks all as of yet.
Yeah, I can certainly do up a list in with this year. I can send that off to you. Yeah, so with this year, I don't have a list handy. I just know that I've walked it, and there's a few issues there that I've noticed. So yeah, I can certainly forward that information directly to you.
Okay, that'd be great. I know some of these are prone to movement, and they do seem only to last a few years, and not to the fault of the fellow doing the concrete. It just seems the movement on the street with the frost we've had.
I'm just wondering for point of order, if maybe Councillor Beck should be sending his request to City Manager Smith, and then City Manager Smith can keep it going. Would that be fair? Okay. Okay, is there any other questions? Okay then, other questions? Kendall, you had something?
Yes, Your Worship. I asked Brad to send me a copy of the loitering bylaw, and I really think that this bylaw needs to be reworked for a couple of reasons. One is graffiti is really, in my mind, vandalism, and maybe that should go into the vandalism aspect, into another bylaw. The other aspect to this is that in the loitering itself, it says that that an offense has been or is about to be committed, but there's no definition of what the offense is. And so for me, it gets a little bit frustrating in looking at loitering, because there's only 4 things of which constitute loitering, and how you can address it from a peace officer or from the bylaw officer. And I think there needs to be a definition there of what that offense is. Like, how do you know what that offense they're doing? There's no definition in there for that. And under the certain, because of the definition of loitering, there is people can, in fact, park on the street and wait because they're not doing anything that's hurting safety, or they're not committing offense. They're not causing a disturbance of the peace. And then lastly, I'd like to know how much we've really had seen in enforcement with this, because I don't know, when we're talking about bringing the RCMP to elevate this bylaw, we really should make it clear so that it can be dealt with properly. Just my few words.
So and Bob might have a little bit more information on this, but I believe when we brought the loitering bylaw into effect, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was at the request of the RCMP, and some of those definitions and kind of the writing in there was based on requests from the RCMP. I'm not sure, I think that's the bylaw, but by all means, I mean, we can take a look into some of those definitions. I'm not sure, Bob, do you have anything to add? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I think, yeah, no problem. It really, I believe the bylaw, I don't have it in front of me right now, but it would be anybody that breaches any provisions that are within that bylaw would be guilty of an offense. So that's where you'd get your definition from. So everything in that bylaw that if it's breached would be guilty of an offense. So I think that's the way that most of those bylaws, types of enforcement bylaws, read. In regards to, I'll get some clarity on the. So part of the reason that a lot of these definitions were put into this regarding graffiti and other things, I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe a lot of it was because some of those, like vandalism, would become a criminal code offense. So that's why they kind of separated some of them from vandalism versus, graffiti and outside of public mischief, etc. They just wanted to have something that would be less harsh if they were going to, because that was one of the problems that the police had indicated why they said the loitering bylaw with all these things in it is because then they could give a charge of X amount of dollars or whatever, rather than prosecuting somebody through court. So that was really the reasoning that the RCMP wanted to have something like this in place. They felt it'd be easier for them to enforce versus going through a court system. But I'll get clarification on that.
Yeah, I understand the process behind it. Yes, I know that the RCMP was requested them, and I'm just saying, as purview of bringing bylaws forward to bring enforcement as council and trying to deal with some of these things. I think that in the loitering part, though, it's very difficult to enforce groups of teens that are in cars through this bylaw, because it doesn't really give it any teeth for that, because they're not disturbing the peace and they're not creating any disturbance. It's not a safety issue. Well, it is a safety issue now, but you know what I'm saying is it feels very loose-ended, and especially when our bylaw officer is quite hindered into going into those situations. I mean, just last Wednesday, I took pictures of up north here, and it's very difficult to try to be the policeman for the police. So I think that maybe a sit down with the RCMP just to kind of make sure that this bylaw is what we want it to be. That's all I'm asking.
Councillor Peterson?
I think Kendall, maybe you're, just my opinion, but maybe you're trying to make more of this than it is, because as a general rule, and I've heard this in lots of different places, general rule, loitering bylaws aren't really meant as something for municipalities to strictly enforce no one loiter. It's more of as a tool there for police and the RCMP to move people along that are there really at times and places where you really don't want them, like a group of teens in a park at 1 in the morning or something. You know, it's just a tool, not necessarily something to say, don't hang out there.
Other comments?
I understand that, Trevor. I'm not. I know it's a tool for the police, but I also know that under the certain conditions that we're at right now with COVID, and the loitering, which is causing litter, there is condoms, there is all that stuff. It becomes I guess a more taxing thing for our public works and so forth. So if that's not the intended purpose, if it's just for a tool for the RCMP, then I think that's how we need to see it. I need to see it.
Okay, Councillor Philipchuk?
I was just going to add that I think it's something that when we have our RCMP here, we'll prepare them that we're going to ask some questions about that, maybe at the next committee of the whole meeting to talk about some of those things that way. Most of this though is complaint driven. So if you have something, you have pictures, by all means, give those to the RCMP. So forward them just as you would if a resident phoned you and said, I have this and this happening, let the RCMP know, as most of this type of bylaw is going to be complaint driven.
Okay, is there any other comments to this or any other questions?
I guess the only thing that I might add is in terms of Councillor Shram's concerns, just in terms of people in vehicles right now with the pandemic and those types of things, I think there's some things in the order too that would play into some of the enforcement, you know, multiple kids in cars and those kinds of things, not social distancing rules. So there are some other mechanisms if it's, you know, that is part of the issue, I guess, right now.
And does bylaw enforce those?
With the pandemic or the order type social distancing rules, we go through Saskatoon Health.
Okay, so they come out and they move the...
They have, and I've heard, obviously it's you know, not instant. They're probably a little short staffed in terms of some of their enforcement on this, but that when you do call the tip line, they do follow up on anything that they do receive. It just might not be instant, which does sometimes create an issue with these types of situations.
Okay. Councillor Beck, did you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question for Brad. This is regarding Appendix A, and this is the facility report. So it's certainly nice to receive something back here from from Fireside Consulting. So that there was certainly good to see. I just have a question. Are we going to see some of their work as the program continues, or is it just going to be one final report at the end? I guess the reason why I do ask that is with this year, like they have identified in phase 2 is their gap analysis. Obviously, it's going to be, still be a while before there's complete. But I just wonder if we're going to see that along the way, or if that's just going to be presented all at one time at the end.
So the intent was, the last time I talked to Doug Ramage, that we would continue to provide these monthly updates, and that they would basically become more wholesome, or they contain a lot more information kind of as we move through the program. So it's not that you'll see actual drafted sections of the plan as we go through, but you'll see kind of all of the background information that they're receiving, the municipalities that they're looking into, kind of all of the information that plays into the data that will be in the final report. And then at the end, we'll receive a draft report, which administration will obviously go through first, and then give council a chance to go through, and there'll be a chance for kind of edits after that draft report if necessary.
Okay, anything else? Councillor Shram?
I just want to bring a reminder to my colleagues and to you, Your Worship. I did send to Brad the Transportation North Committee Transportation Plan Planning Committee update since just done. There's a lot of information in there that's been updated. Just for everyone's sake, It's probably good to peruse, just understand what is there. I've asked Brad if there's anything in there that would affect us, especially when it comes to numbers on highways and some of the traffic, the heavy loads and so forth. I know that we don't deal with the highways, but just understanding what is around us is good for all of us to know.
Okay, thank you. Brad, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just I just received the reports this morning. I have to admit, since the days when Mayor Spence and I used to attend that meeting and talk about gravel on roads and stuff like that, it does seem like there's a lot more kind of concrete information in the report. So I'm going to take a peruse through it. I've already started, and if there's anything pertinent to the city or P4G, I'll definitely send my comments on to council.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to Public Works.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I know I did put in my report that we hadn't started street sweeping yet, but we were able to start last Thursday. The weather changed for us, so we did start sweeping priority streets. And we will continue to do that through next week. We have a beautiful forecast ahead of us. And just, I guess, like to mention, staff seem to be coping quite well during this COVID-19 pandemic and adapting to a new way of doing their jobs. Social distancing, PPE, sewer backups, meter installs, etc. Other than that, I have nothing further to add to my report.
Okay, does anybody have any questions of Public Works?
I do, Your Worship. Just
okay, Councillor Shram.
Just to say, there's quite a bit of difference in the painting that the pictures that you've provided, Jason. Thank you very much. Are you planning to continue using the Everline coatings?
We would like to. I would like to call Evan back this year. I see somewhere, if you notice on the Everline coatings of 2020, there's quite a bit of exactly where the tire tracks go. And he initially had said that approximately 2 years of life. So I want to see if they would come back and honor their warranty or honor that lifespan and see if they will do that for us at no charge. But I haven't been able to have a meeting with them yet due to this COVID-19.
Is there anything else? Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much,
You're welcome.
Jason. Moving on to Recreation.
Good afternoon, Mayor Spence, members of council. You have my report in front of you. It's strictly information only, as we are really down to maintenance and just some operational stuff. So not a lot of community involvement happening there and dealing with customers. So a lot of it is just maintenance. So if you have any questions, fire away.
Okay, let's open the floor to questions. I can't see you, so if you want to.
Your Worship.
Okay, Councillor Shram.
I would just, Paul, I was wondering a couple of things, and that is, in the area of the vandalism that you showed, is this a repeated offense, and or is this something new?
This is new. This is the concession in between the ball diamonds. Staff don't get out to check it as often as we would like. We actually had to clear a pathway through with the payloader just to get to the facility, just to start preparations and doing some work inside, and that's when it was discovered. We sent 2 weeks of video to the RCMP, and my report is actually incorrect. It says 3 vandals, and the RCMP have watched a little bit more of the security tape, and actually there are 5 individuals that will be charged in this. They haven't released the names and the ages to me as of yet. When I get those, I'll definitely pass those on to council.
Because are we thinking it's youth?
It is 3 youth, yeah.
Let's see.
Oh, sorry, 5 youth, yes.
5 youth. Okay.
Thank you, Paul. The other question I have is, I noticed that the federal government is doing a online Canada Day celebration. Has your department thought of doing that, or gone that far ahead yet?
We've just nicely brought that up, that we do apply for funding every year for a physical Canada Day, and we just haven't heard anything back on that, as Corley and I were discussing. We haven't gotten into any programming as of yet. There's to administration in here right now. And so a lot of that programming has kind of fallen to the side. We will discuss it and see what we can come up with though.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Peterson.
I have heard word of a couple different people that are throwing, or places that are throwing around ideas of having like kind of pop-up drive-ins, kind of so everyone can stay in their vehicles and keep the physical distancing, but a way for people to get out of the houses and maybe in a way participate as a community in some things. Have you and Corley talked about how that might work and if it's something that the recreation might put on?
We haven't, like I just mentioned to Councillor Shram, we really haven't looked at any new programming. We're kind of doing our best just to kind of hang on and survive and look after those day-to-day activities and whatnot that are going on. We haven't planned to do any extra programming to date, just simply we seem to be lots on our plate just going forward as is right now. So we'll definitely look at some of that stuff as we get into it, but right now we have not.
Councillor Philipchuk.
I just noticed in your report about the expansion date going to May 15th now. It's been extended to May 15th. We've already got our application in. Any word on when decisions will be made on something like that, or anything else we can do as a mayor and council to maybe help support our application?
They haven't given us a date of when they're going to make those announcements. Of course, it's always ongoing, and it's a project that is near and dear to our hearts and community. So we just ask that when you're sitting at those tables and with those people that are making those decisions, that put the word in that we are going forward with this, and that this project is important to our community. So the more support and the more word we get out there, hopefully it gets us to the top and on the list, and hopefully they keep the program and look at it as some economic stimulus to get the country back going and getting some of these big projects moving forward.
And just to follow up with that, like it seemed from SUMA when we were there, now municipalities of Saskatchewan, that Lori Carr, the municipal's minister, was one of the key decision makers with that. So that's a person that if we have a chance to chat with at all, make sure we say something. One other quick question was, it just said about water supply at campsite 15. What's happening there?
We've got a valve that is rusting. We had it tested last year. Drinking water is all good, but the appearance of the water comes out a little orange. So that's one of our key items, was to fix that. And we never got at it at the end of last year. Some of the delays in opening are going to give us an opportunity to get in, dig it up, replace it, get the water tested as per the standards, and then we can look at opening the facilities. So.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
Just
Councillor
maybe.
Tooley? Councillor Tooley and then City Manager Smith.
Yeah, I got sort of three different things to check with you on, Paul. First one is just walking through the parks. I'm noticing a number of the light standards are really quite leaning. And I'm just wondering if there's any type of a fix for those. Do you want me to do all three questions first, or do I want one by one?
Let's go one by one. SAS Power has been contacted. They were contacted last June about the repairs of the leaning. There are lights within RJ Gillick Park and in Zane Demetrician Park that are leaning. We have asked them to come and repair them. They are SAS Power lights. So we were hoping that they would have done that when the parks were frozen. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So we're still on the list to get fixed.
Okay. I know there's a couple behind my place that are really bad.
Yeah.
Question number two is, have we heard anything, or have we had any correspondence with the folks that are behind the carnival or the exhibition that's scheduled for, I believe the dates are in July?
We have talked to them because we do not have a contract with them to appear. There are no charges if or when we cancel as a community. they are waiting for the government to tell them whether they are good to go or not. So if we as the city decide not to have the fair, we can cancel at any point in time. With them, they're really waiting. So we do have some time to make that decision if and play it by ear. But yeah, we can go at any time if we want.
Question number 3. With I know there's been a little bit of, and this is more speculative than anything, but I know there's been some discussion that Saskatoon is being considered as a venue for some potential, continuation of NHL season for a neutral territory. Just wondering if maybe there's some merit to see if you can join in part of that discussion. Maybe we can get landed as an off-site practice facility.
Do you know who they're talking to there, Kevin?
I would imagine probably SaskTel Center would be one. And then beyond that, I don't know whether it would be the league itself or sort of where that would go from there. But like I said, I've heard sort of that as a speculative thing. Again, don't know whereabouts it's at or what the reality looks like.
Yeah, we've heard that as well. And so and we'd have to really look at that because that would require us to put the ice back in, and depending on the usage and what that was going to cost. So we'd really have to weigh it'd be cool to have that within our community. Nobody's really coming out to watch it and attend it, but there are huge costs with putting the ice in and just having it for practice ice for a couple hours in a day. So
yeah, I was just wondering if there was going to be a potential revenue coming out of it. So
yeah, no, I'll definitely look into that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Manager Smith?
Yeah, I was just going to add a little to the question regarding the timing of the application for the funding for the infrastructure program. I think I heard the minister when we had our city mayor's caucus meeting advise that they moved that date, but they haven't moved any of the other dates regarding like it's only the intake date. The rest of them of when they're going to be looking at the applications and so on, I believe is still the same.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll move on to protective services.
Good afternoon, Mayor Spence and members of council. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. You have my report in front of you. Basically, our response model hasn't changed. We were pretty quick out the gate as far as setting up best safety practices and PPE for our members. Our call volumes are picking up just a little bit, but we're still well below average. As you know, we are still at a full complement of firefighters with the exception of Albert Taylor, who I'd like to mention after 30 years of meritorious service has retired. So we'll certainly miss his experience, that's for sure. Other than that, operationally, we've just kind of finished ramping ourselves up for wildland fire season. So we're 100% ready to go for that. And you have my report in front of you if you have any questions.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
I just have a comment. Russ, you said in your report that the CN numbers are down. Some of them are up. Just not that I'm trying to contradict you, but they are overall down. But there are some other things that have come through that are up, and just so that we can still be aware that it is what it is. But there is some dangerous things still going through our community.
Yep, there is for sure. The reference is basically the number of trains and the number of dangerous goods cars that are going through. The percentage is up though, because it seems like more cars per train are of that variety. So as far as I can't see there being a slowdown for rail traffic whatsoever. So there's always going to be that risk, but hopefully it continues trending a little bit down from where it was. And we'll see by the end of Q2, we should have a really good idea on that one.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Russ. Moving down to economic development.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. In front of you is my report, just several updates, both on the regional task force work that I've been completing, as well as ongoing support directly from my department. So that's outside of my work with the task force. You should have received an email this morning. My apologies, it came a little bit later than I wanted, but it's regarding the Center of Excellence with a little bit of the follow-up for your review. And at the very end of my report, there is an item that has a recommendation requires a decision. It is a request from the Prairie Sky Chamber of Commerce. They've sent a letter to council requesting the waiving of 4 months of rent. So from that, I put together several different options for council to consider. Option 1 is accept their request to waive their lease fees. Under this option, waiving lease fees for 4 months for a total of $422.40 per month would equate to, I guess, a drop in revenue of $1,689.60. Second option is to defer the time that they're requesting that the fees be waived and just add it to the end of the lease, thereby extending the lease. Their lease is up or set to expire, I should say, February 1st, 2021. So this option would extend their lease to June 1st, 2021. The third option is to do similar to the second option, so defer the time added to the end of the lease and apply an interest rate to the deferred months. In my experience and what I've been seeing over the past month, in these types of situations, the interest rate that is typically applied to the deferred amounts is roughly around the 6%. So that would equate to about $25.34 additional monies per month for the 4 months that we would extend the lease. And then the fourth option that I provided is to deny the request that the chamber's made and continue having them pay their monthly lease fees as per the obligations in their lease agreement. My recommendation at this time is that council consider option 1 and grant the chamber's request, waive their lease rate for 4 months.
Okay, is there any questions? Councillor Peterson?
I guess my first question is, are they still able to access their space because it is, they have their own entryway to it?
Yeah, yes, they are.
Okay, in my opinion then is that if they still have access to their space and they're still going in there, then I would suggest that what we would do is we would say that they can defer their payment, and then those payments could get paid back over the life of the lease in kind of an equal amount. So if it ends up to be $1,600, that over 16 months you add $100 to those next 16 payments.
So that's you're talking about a fifth option then, or are you talking about option 2? You're talking a fifth option.
Yes, yeah, where we wouldn't say extend the life of the lease. It's just, okay, we'll defer when you have to pay it, and but we won't make you pay it all in one chunk at the end. We'll say just add a little bit to each of your future payments after that to pay it back.
Okay, Councillor Beck?
Thank you, Mayor Spence. Certainly, for me, when I had certainly seen the request, this year, I mean, like, I think that there is a little bit of validation, to what's being asked for. I do think, however, we're just with the changing nature, the length of term, really with this year, it's not really business as normal out there. We don't really know exactly how long that this might last. And quite honestly, we haven't really, I think as a council and as an administration, discussed at our COVID meetings, what our response might be for the commercial side of things. So, with this year, I mean, I'm like, I can certainly appreciate the request coming in. I can see that being passed along to us. So we might be able to, kind of kickstart some of our discussions on this as to how maybe best to approach it. But one of the things that I wouldn't want to do is kind of, do something, let's say ad hoc or, something that we haven't really fully, thought through that would be able to proceed with on a community-wide basis. So I don't know. I mean, this year, like I said, I can certainly appreciate the ask coming through. I think it's good that it's hit our desk and we have a sense of what their ask is going to be. I don't think, however, at this time that it would be particularly prudent for us to make a decision one way or the other, just because there's so many factors and variables still to be, considered and hashed out on this. So I myself would like to see this actually deferred for, for some more information and a little bit broader of a scope as to how we're going to deal with this as a, as a issue just separately on its own.
Okay, Councillor Philipchuk.
Okay. I guess I agree somewhat with Councillor Beck on this, that it would be nice to find out what are all of our potential requests that could come our way. I completely see business private leases completely different. They would not be coming to us for us to cover their lease. We are the landlord of this building. So what other buildings, what other facilities, what other things could we potentially see coming our way is one thing that I'd like to see before making a final decision. But I do support this in the fact that looking at the partnership that's really formed over this last little bit, because I think we've been a leader in the province with the leadership of Josh and Kevin on council, working with Martinsville and working with the chamber to really be ahead of the curve. Because you've noticed that at the very beginning, there was a lot of panic of businesses and a lot of things happening out there. I look at what would have we invested in Winbexa or something like that would be a lot less than these 3 months of lease that they're requesting. So that's maybe where I'm coming from, that I would support number one right now, with the idea that I would also like to know, I'd like to know what other requests potentially could come to us, knowing that we've already waived the leases of the, at the Legends building, as we should, because they have no access to their facility. So that's a little bit different. I agree with Trevor on that vantage point. But what other things potentially can come to us? Private businesses are a different category. I can't support that a business that has a lease to pay is going to be a municipal. We're going to have to worry ourselves about that lease.
Okay, and we're talking, right now we're talking 4 months, but as Councillor Beck suggested, we don't know for sure how long this could go on. So we do have to consider that. Any other comments? Councillor Shram?
I appreciate the request. Again, I think I agree with Councillor Beck. We should look at and Councillor Philipchuk, we need to look at this as a whole. I find it difficult to give the chamber help when we are not giving Route 11 help. And I think that they're in the same building, and we kind of need to look at that. Those are maybe two different groups, but it boils down to dollars and cents, and I think we have to be consistent. Those are my comments.
Well, what if the expectations of the chamber was just to pay their utility costs? I don't know what those would be, but would that be something that council may consider? Yeah. Well, what type of information, Councillor Beck, are you thinking you would still like to see?
Well, certainly this year, just looking at, the province in the next week or let's say a week or so is going to start announcing what they're back to work, or let's say, some of the safeguards that they're going to start lifting, at this point here. So at least with this year, we'd be able to, kind of through that process, see how that might actually affect our businesses and our community, and basically have a better sense as to what's going on. Certainly with this year, with understanding this in a broader community context. I mean, with this year, to Councillor Shram's point, with this year, we do still have the ongoing discussion on Route 11. Then we have this request here from from the chamber. Also with this here, we haven't seen anything yet from perhaps the golf course, but there again, they also have a lease with us, and a part of their season might be affected also. So with this year, I think rather than just kind of one-offing each one of those and whatnot, just to make sure that we have a let's say like a response that's going to be universal, through that there, that can apply to our other lease, let's say holders, that would be there at the Legend Center, because I guess with this here, I don't want to be caught in, well, we did 4 months there, so-and-so is only asking for 3 months, or, let's say have that difference there. I think just having that overall structure in terms of, what those true costs are going to be to us, basically having those validated and, kind of moving through recommendations as a whole from administration, rather than just, responding to each individual request as they come in. So like I said, like there's a lot of variables and moving factors to this, just because the, like the province is coming up with their back to work legislation. It'd be nice to see that timeline. Maybe 4 months isn't sufficient. And then with this year, I don't know, are you looking at 5 months or 6 months deferred for the year? I don't know. One of the other things that hasn't been brought forward is, certainly this year as a municipality, we do, collect, so like the business license, fees and whatnot, perhaps for the interruption of business. One of the things that we might consider is, perhaps, basically doing it where, any business license that's valid for the 2020 might be extended into 2021. There again, like there's a multiple different things out there that can still be considered to, to safeguard all of our businesses, not just, like those actual leaseholders of ours. So this year, I think I would like to have that broader framework and really make sure that we have it thoughtful and able to deal with it comprehensively, rather than a whole bunch of, like individual deals, here and there, because someone's going to feel left out or that they were disadvantaged. I'd like to have one policy on all of that and deal with this comprehensively at once, where all of council can basically have that, that wholesome discussion on it.
Okay, does any other council members feel that there's some information they'd like to see? Councillor Tooley?
I don't know if there's any information further I'd want to see, but one thing I think I'd just sort of like to, I think maybe just add to what Councillor Beck is saying, and not to diminish what the chamber is asking for. I think they've got some very valid reasons. They're going to be losing some sources of their revenue for the next little while that does cover their rents. But I would like to see a bit of a collective approach to how we're going to handle this for any other renters that we do have with the city. I think, Route 11, I'm assuming, is in a very similar situation in the sense of their revenue sources are probably quite limited right now, as well as the tenant spaces that we have at the Legend Center. I would like to see that be sort of a consistent piece across the board, so we're not sort of patchworking it together for different tenants.
Councillor Peterson?
It is going to be a patchwork, and where there's nothing we can do about that, because each of these renters are a different situation. The only two that are going to be very similar are Route 11 and the chamber. After that, each of the ones are in a different situation, different ways they're affected, and we'll have to deal with them all individually. So there will be essentially at minimum 4 different ways that we deal with these things. And there's nothing wrong with dealing with each individually. We got to accept that that's what it is and move forward with that.
Okay, so City Manager Smith, did you get enough information to bring some more information to us? How do we want to proceed?
I think so. What I heard was you want all, as a landlord, how many leases do we have and the amounts of those leases, and then bring it back to council and they'll make a decision on whether it's all at one, whether they want to treat them individually or however they, because I'm hearing different things from everybody. But just to give you like we have some will be outside, have outside access, and that would be like Route 11, Chamber, Anytime Fitness, and Warman Sports. Those would be the only ones. Inside would be Subway, Twinsies, and Booster Juice. And I think that would be it. The only other two lease agreements that we have are for land, and that's the daycare by the Brian King Center and the golf course, and they're $1. So not sure how we would help there, but the other one, we can put that information. Is that the information that you're looking for? Just gather that information, presented at the next committee of the whole or council?
Okay, well, we should talk about timelines here because I think
Yes.
we don't want to drag this. So would you be prepared to bring that information to us, to council, so we could have a conversation about it again then? Because that's a week from now, because our next committee of the whole is next month. So that's kind of dragging it out.
Okay, I certainly can. I could provide it to you right now, actually, but you probably want it in a
format that we can read and
yes.
go through. I just think that personally, I don't know if we want to drag this out another month in an emergency. Normally, your next committee of the whole would be just fine, but in this situation, I think that it would appear that we're dragging it out. Councillor Beck?
Yeah, thank you. Certainly with, I'm not sure that I'm prepared to agree that this is a emergency, from the chamber standpoint.
No, I meant in an emergency, like not in an emergency situation. That's kind of where we're all at right now.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I had heard you differently.
That's it, Councillor Beck? Okay, Councillor Tooley?
Just a couple of minor things to kind of keep in mind too, is that any programs that are going to be announced that are going to be, relief for property owners or anything like that, I highly doubt that we're going to be, as a municipality, that we would be entitled to. The other component is organizations like the Chamber, Route 11. I would suspect that they're going to be shut out of some of those kind of programs as well as not-for-profit or community-based organizations. They may not, even like some of the lending and that kind of thing that's available out there for small businesses, they're likely not going to be qualified for some of those.
Okay. Well, and the other thing to consider, this is also, like, we're talking about some of our people that lease from us, but there's probably going to be other organizations that do work or have committees in the city of Warman that may come to us, or potential to come to the city of Warman that may come to us as well. So I guess we need to look at this in a pretty well-rounded way. I agree with the comments that have been made that you don't want to just make something on an impulse, because it can affect anyone that comes to us in our future. And I know there will be others. So I do think we have to have a comprehensive look at it. And even though, as you said, Trevor, there may be some, it may not be a one size fits all type situation. I think that we need to feel that we've done the research, and we have a good handle on what we're offering, because we too are going to be suffering financial losses too. So we have to be careful in how much we can give. I mean, that's the bottom line. So anyway, Councillor Philipchuk, you another comment? Your mic's on. You're on mute.
Just going back a little bit to what Councillor Shram had mentioned about comparing the Route 11 to this one. They are different, because the Route 11 one, I expect that we're still going to see that one coming back to us. That was for the full term of their agreement, which is different than really looking at a COVID response, in a sense of looking at a term along the way. And I do agree with you that we need to be prepared if people come and ask for tax concessions along the way too, that because that's really where the other businesses could come and say, this is how I was hit, here's how much tax I pay the city of Warman, what can you do to help? We need to be prepared for something like that, as far as what will our response be, because I think that's a different vantage point, because really us being the landlords, that taxation part doesn't come into play for us as far as our buildings, but that's the next level that could come out of all this. And that's why I guess I went back to the support was just seeing how we got ahead of the curve with a lot of this stuff with businesses instead of letting things happen and then trying to play catch up. So our chamber and our two cities have really worked well together through a lot of this that could have looked way different if they didn't be proactive with it.
Well, and kind of like what I mentioned in my email or my message to you guys is other cities are experiencing a lot of requests, and as time goes on, they keep on getting a lot more. So we've just started getting the requests, but I'm sure there'll be more to come. So we need to be prepared for that and what we're prepared to give. That's going to happen. So it may not just be from leasers. It may come from business. It may come from all sorts of different places. So we need to be prepared. Councillor Shram?
Not that I'm trying to increase our workload in this regard, but Councillor Tooley did mention an email about our taxes deferment from the end of August. Should that also be included in a discussion maybe between now and before Monday, just so that we're all on the same page with those types of things?
Right.
Okay. City Manager Smith, do you have any comments with what you've heard so far?
I was actually going to ask a question a bit ago of Josh in regards to what are you hearing of other landlords? Are they reducing their or eliminating or waiving some of their rental? Again, I only raise this because it'd be part of the report. I think it's important for all of us to remember that if, as taxpayers, the business community might come back to us and say, excuse me, but why are you giving away rents and making us look bad? Anyway, I just don't know where that is. So I guess the question, that's the reason why I was going to ask Josh the question of, is there a lot of businesses, landlords, other than cities, the city, that are waiving fees? And maybe that's a tough question to ask you right now, Josh, and we can put it in a report to council as well.
No, I think, I appreciate all of the comments because they're all valid and they're all things that we've considered from a task force level, and I've considered when sort of looking at this. To that end, when this was one of the biggest topics of concern when we sort of hit this panic phase of COVID-19, how are our storefront businesses going to pay their rent and pay their leases? And there were heated conversations between tenants and landlords going back and forth. And so we, as a task force, where we eventually ended up finding the most value was suggesting strongly in some cases that tenants and landlords have that conversation and open up those lines of communication, because to Councillor Peterson's point, those relationships, whether the length of the lease agreement, how much they're paying, what those costs look like, if it's triple net, there's so many different factors that you can't have a blanket solution for all those types of businesses. Now, that being said, with the city, the way that it looks, we only really have a handful of tenants, but they are all very unique. And so what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is, to answer your question, is a wide variety of things ranging from, landlords being proactive and offering to defer leases. I have a situation where a landlord is actually waiving on a month-to-month basis as per the request of the tenant. To landlords who refuse to give up any ground and feel like they're the ones who are being victimized or marginalized. But then on the flip side, I have a case of a landlord who's essentially being held hostage by their AAA tenant who's refusing to pay because they're sort of forced into that situation. So, Bob and you and I talked a little bit about this, and you had asked prior to me putting the report together what my thoughts were. And I wish I could give you a blanket response or something that we could apply to every single tenant that we have, but it's very difficult because every situation is unique. So my recommendation, I think it just bears knowing, my recommendation came out of the fact that the chamber they do have access to the space, but they aren't using it, which is obviously their prerogative if they decide to do so. But also just looking at the fact that major event, that Wimbexa, constitutes a significant amount of revenue for them, and it's been postponed indefinitely, if not for 2020. And so obviously it's something to take into account, but I can certainly appreciate everybody's comments and the need to be fair across the board. So I hope that answers your question.
I guess we also have to remember too, this isn't our own money. This is taxpayers' money. And so whatever we do, we have to keep that in mind. Councillor Beck?
Yeah, and certainly to the very last point there that Josh had brought forward is certainly with this year like Wimbaxa, and that kind of thing, and certainly with this year, like this is where quite honestly that's one of those regional events. With this year, maybe some reach out to see what Martinsville might be doing, and that kind of thing, to kind of make sure that what one community is doing, the other community is kind of thinking of in terms of similar support. Because like there again, this is one of those businesses where it's not just Warman based. I mean, it like the rental might be here and whatever, but I mean certainly in terms of the request here for Wimbaxa, that is basically a regionally participation in their event. So I don't know. I mean, at this point here, would we reach out to see what Martinsville is going to do in terms of assistance on that, or do we just take it all on our own? And certainly to back up, Cheryl's point on this is, we are dealing with public money here that we do have to certainly be responsible for, and that's where, to me, that extended time to really think about all of the ramifications of doing anything at this point without having all of the information, I think could create more of a problem and confusion out there than a coordinated response. So I don't know. I mean, I certainly appreciate Bob's point saying, hey, you know what, I can give you the lease numbers and who they are and how many we have outstanding. But I think that there's just things that we just need to really have a discussion on before we ad hoc it. And I guess I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you.
And you should also, you made a point there about Wimbaxa being a regional event. This isn't, the chamber is regional all the way around. It's not just the event. It's in a regional chamber of commerce. So maybe the approach should be regional from all the parties that are a part of that membership. Anyway, we'll move on and we'll wait to see what we get. It would be interesting also, City Manager Smith, to see if some of the communities that are around our size, that are close to us, if they've had to deal with some of these situations and how they've dealt with it, because maybe that would give us a bit of insight. Maybe they're not dealing with it at all. Maybe because they're also suffering losses, they've decided just to leave it. But it'd be interesting to hear what they're doing. Would you be able to maybe get some of that information?
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure Josh is putting all these notes down and he'll have a report ready for the next meeting as to exactly from, because, well, I'm not saying that to be funny, just that it has a lot to do, this all has to do with commercial, really, and how everybody in the city gets treated, whether we're a landlord or whether there's a developer that's a landlord. Mm-hmm. Maybe council looks at that and says, no, it is different. That's good. Then you have a different discussion about that. But I do think that it has to be a bigger report than just, as I'd indicated, I can provide you today with the numbers. There's not very many, but it's a bigger picture thing. I think that from an economic development perspective, which would include what are other communities around us doing. I think that's a very good comment. And I think we'll maybe have a separate discussion. I'll just ask council on the tax deferral and I guess not the tax deferral, but more of the interest past September, like September, October, November, December, or September, October. We were kind of just holding off on that because our policy wasn't like others. Some of them that made a decision, they were starting to add penalties and things to taxes as of April, May, June. We were down the road a little ways. That's not saying we don't have to have that discussion. We certainly can. But a lot of those communities that were having those, making those decisions, were making it because it was upon them right now. So they started adding penalties in May or in June or some in April. So we haven't had that discussion yet, but we can certainly bring it to the table to see if from September on, council wants to defer or not to charge the penalty on taxes.
Okay, and just because we're talking about a policy that would be overarching, I'm not suggesting that we bring this information to council at the next council meeting and then make a decision. I think it's just for discussion. If we feel like we're able to make a decision, I guess we can do that. But there is another council meeting 2 weeks from that date, because we may need more information, or I don't know if Josh will be able to obtain all the information in this short time frame. But I would like to see that at least the conversation continue, so it just kind of drop off. That seem fair?
I think he'll be looking for things to do at home anyway, so he can.
Okay.
Sorry, you cut out. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so Josh, on your report, are we going to be talking, you do have your Center of Excellence report. Are we going to be talking in more depth about that today?
Sorry, kind of cutting out, but I'm presuming you're referring to the Center of Excellence email?
Yes.
Yeah, we can certainly talk about it. My intention was to have it off to everyone last week, but it took me a little bit to prepare that. So if anybody has any questions or concerns, we can talk about it here. They can certainly email me. I'm open to whichever venue.
Well, does anyone have any comments that are right in the forefront right now? Councillor Beck?
Yeah, with this year, this year I didn't have a chance to, to see that email from Josh earlier today. So, I myself have not reviewed it. I've only gone through the package that was provided. Yeah, with this year, I don't have any questions at this time because I have not viewed that document.
Okay. Councillor Peterson, were you trying to say something to us?
Just basically mumbling the same thing that Richard is saying, is that I just got it this morning. I haven't had a chance to read it either.
Okay, well then we'll wait. We'll review it and then we'll discuss it later on. It's not that it's a priority right now anyway. So does that sound fair? Okay. Anything else for Josh? Okay, seeing nothing, we'll move down to communications.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So in my report, I provided for you the usual social media statistics. The majority of messaging going out from the city has been COVID related. I think everything's been fairly well received by residents. If at any time council would like more information put out there or anything, just please let me know.
Okay, does anybody have any questions of Aaron? Councillor Beck?
Yeah, no real question for me, but I just wanted to thank Aaron for getting out the physician appreciation memo there and whatnot. So thank you very much for getting that out and posting that through social media.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think this brings us down. Do we have any in-camera conversations? Oops. I didn't see, I haven't been paying attention. Okay, seeing no hands or any comments, we will move. Our next meeting is Tuesday, May 19th for Committee of the Whole. Do we have someone to adjourn our meeting? Councillor Philipchuk, do we have a seconder? Nobody wants to adjourn? Seconder for adjournment? Okay, Councillor Shram, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Council, or anyone who wants to stick around after the meeting after we're off.